Well, hello everybody. Kyle Broder here from Full Skills Exam Prep. So there was a big piece of news that came out not even 24 hours ago, and that is that the ICCRC exam has changed. So we're going to talk about that in this video, and you could see that we have a very positive outlook of this. Now I know it's a last minute change, it's a surprise change, and I would say to all of you, welcome to immigration, because there are changes that happen at the very last minute sometimes, and sometimes there's no hints or anything like that, and then the change comes out and it becomes part of your life. So for all of you taking the August exam in about a month, this change is going to affect your exam. But again, we have a very positive outlook on these changes and how it's going to affect your exam performance. So the email that you may have received looks just like this. And you can see the date over here as well. This was released really late yesterday afternoon. And on our side, we've been working like crazy. We have the whole team here working like crazy to make sure that, of course, you can take advantage of this, because we want our materials to 100% prepare you for the upcoming exam. So you can see from this email that they've renamed the exam. They're calling it the Entry to Practice exam, the RCIC EPE, and it's still 3 hours long. The difference is that it is 140 questions. It's still open book as well, which is great, and a lot of people have been really worried because they take a look at that number. They say 140 questions, oh my God, I can barely survive 100 questions. What am I going to do? And you can see on the bottom here, I've got a little thing that says, keep calm and don't panic. And you know what? That's the way to think of changes like this, especially this change. And I know exactly what you're going through. I took the exam myself, and Barbara here did, Luz, Lisette, Nadia, everybody did. And it's stressful enough preparing for an exam. Then when you have a change that goes on the exam, it can be a stressful time for you. So what I'm telling you is, don't worry, we've got you covered. And even when you take a look at these changes, the way that we're going to analyze these changes in this video too, you'll see there's some very positive elements in these changes, and there's a couple little negative ones, but really it's a neutral change. It's neither positive nor negative, and I think it's even positive because it's not very negative. We'll talk about that in the next few slides here, but this change is, I think, a pretty small change. Even though it sounds like a big one, it sounds like you have 140 questions, and you do, but there's a different way to look at this and to think of this strategically. And once you start thinking of this in the way that I'll present it to you, I think you're going to think of this change just a little bit differently. So the two big changes that were announced are here. So as we discussed before, the biggest one is that the exam is going to be 140 questions in 3 hours. Not 100 questions in 3 hours. And there is a format change in half of those questions. So it's just a little bit different. And like I said, I mean, this is a neutral change. Don't worry too much. Keep up your studying. Do not delay your exam. I give you that advice again and again and again. We always give that advice, and that is to not delay your exam. The reason why, of course, is because there's always so many immigration changes, and we want you to become an RCIC right away. So take the exam, keep going with the exam, keep going with your studies. If you've been working through our free lessons, I mean, you're just about there already. So keep up the good work, keep moving. All the strategies and everything like that that we discuss in the lessons, the material, and the seminars, they all still work. There's just a slight change in the exam format. Okay, so we saw that there are two big changes in this, and that is, of course, the amount of questions and the style of some questions. So for a lot of you, I hope for all of you really, it's going to be the first and only time you're going to take the exam. Before, the exam had 100 questions, and basically you read a story that was maybe 1 paragraph long. With our material, we always make our questions a little bit more difficult and a little bit longer as well. But with the exam, you'd have a story that you read, and then you would have a question, and then you'd have 4 potential answers. Now, this new format is going to have 70 questions that are similar, almost the exact same style that I just told you about, and then 70 questions that they call them scenario based. And it just means that an independent question only has, one story and then one question and then 4 potential answers. Meanwhile, what they call the scenario-based questions, even though they're all scenarios, if you're thinking of scenario as being a story in a question, well, they all have scenarios really. But the way that they call this in the study guide is a scenario-based question. The difference is that it'll be a story, and then that story is going to be used for 3 or 4 or 5 questions. Now, those 3 or 4 or 5 questions have, again, 4 potential answers in each, and that's A, B, C, or D. So what is positive about these changes? Now, I think just having a positive mindset is a good idea for life, and of course for life as an RCIC, and for all of you, of course, as future RCICs. Well, specifically with this change to your upcoming exam, there are some very positive elements in here. Now, one of those positive elements is that the content of the exam is the same. So if you've been studying and working through our free lessons, if you've been working through the test day data booklet, well, you're covered. The knowledge that you've gained from that is, of course, on the exam. Now, I know a lot of people say, yeah, but I have to answer 140 questions now. It's too much. It's not. I'm going to show you an example later on about how this works together with the timing that you need to follow for the upcoming exam. And of course, our seminars deal with this as well. So one of the advantages here is that you are now reading just about 85 stories to answer these questions. Now, I think you've got the other line here. If they increased the number of questions to 140, and you had to read 140 stories to answer those questions, I think that's way too much. That would be, I think, pretty impossible. But in this case, you're actually reading less stories in this format. So previously, you would have had to have read 100 stories, and then you'd answer 1 question for each one of those, really. And that would be the question. Well, now, as we discussed before, you're going to have 70 stories with 1 question and 4 potential answers, and you're going to have maybe 16, it depends on what the average is, but maybe 15, 16, 17 stories, and each of those are going to have 3 or 4 or 5 questions. So we're going to see how that works with the timing of the exam, but you could see that I think in this one it's positive because it could be worse. You could have 140 stories that you have to read, and that would be, I think, just way too much to do in 3 hours. So this news was a big surprise to everybody, even to us. We had nobody knew anything really about this. For people taking the exam, there were no announcements. For schools, there was no announcements. For us, there was no announcement at all. And you know what? That's life as an RCIC. You have to get used to kind of sudden changes in government and government-like organizations and organizations like the ICCRC, of course. So this is a change. It's a surprise. Don't worry. Don't panic. You still have you still have 3 hours remaining in the exam itself. For all of you studying, right now it's the day after. It's not even 24 hours after they announced this when I'm recording this video, and you still have about a month until the exam. So really concentrate on your studies. This is a small change in the grand scheme of things. And on our side, everything that we've got, of course, for our material, it is, of course, updated in terms of content, and it is certainly relevant for the upcoming exam, despite these small changes. So your test day data booklet is, of course, essential to passing your exam. The simulations are, of course, essential to passing your exam. And the free lessons. You really need to work through those. Now, with these changes and with the new question format, we are implementing a ton of free material right now as I speak to inform you of these changes and to get you used to these questions. So if you purchased Simulation 1, 2, and 3, for example, you're going to receive an email next week with information about, because we're going to give you access to a whole bunch of new questions so that you can see both formats really of the exam, and so that, well, hey, it's free questions for you, it's free support, and for us, we want to be there. We want to help you all the way through, even if there is a big change like this. All right, so what is positive about this change? Well, when we look at the independent questions, now that is the exact same style as you've worked through. So if you're working through our simulations, the lessons, everything like that, this question style is the same. And it's just like this. So I've got a timer here, and I want to see how long it takes you to answer this question. So I'll give you the remaining time here, and I hope you can answer this in the meantime. And I'll give you a little hint as to where to find this answer if you have the test day data booklet already. All right, so if you finished that within the 2 minutes, that's pretty good. If you didn't, that's okay. I mean, you're probably just starting your studies, and that's perfectly fine. Well, the one kind of interesting part about this question type, those independent questions as they call them, is that you have to analyze one story to answer one question. Now let's do a little bit of math here. And if this question, for example, took you 2 minutes, and you have 100 questions like this, so that's with the past versions of the exam. Now you're going to need to work on your speed, because as you can see, you only have 3 hours to work through the ICCRC exam. And really, if you're taking 2 minutes per question and you have 100 questions, that's going to be 200 minutes to complete the exam. So I don't think the question that you had was difficult at all. It's from the newly released, brand newly released, I guess, study guide from the ICCRC, and I've got the link for you just on the bottom here for that question. And with that one, I mean, I don't think it was a difficult question at all. I'm hoping that you answered it, of course, in under 2 minutes. But if it took you 2 minutes, I mean, we have to start thinking of the speed that you're going to need to have in order to really pass the exam. Now that was before, when it was 100 questions. When it's 70 questions, we still have to work on speed, but we need to take a look, of course, at the new question format. All right, so we have 70 scenario questions. So that's what they call scenario questions, even though all the questions really have stories in them. But we're using one story in this case to answer 3 or 4 or 5 questions. So that's why we say that you're going to read really only 16, 17 stories when you're answering those 70 questions. So it's a pretty good advantage for you. So here are the questions, and I'll leave you the time here to work through these. All right, so the 2 minutes are up. Now, if you answered all these questions in the 2 minutes, I think it's perfect. And I hope that this calmed your nerves a little bit. Something I really like about this style of question, when they have one story to answer 3 or 4 or 5 questions, is that it was something that, this is something that Barbara said actually. She said that during the exam, she found it a little bit stressful to jump from topic to topic every question, because you'll have one question dealing with refugees, then another question dealing with, the next question will deal with maybe a provincial nomination, next one will be a spouse, etc. And I agree with her. I found when I took the exam, that's a bit of a stressful area in terms of working through the exam, and I'm sure you'd agree. Well, the beauty of these, what they call those scenario questions, where you have one story to answer 3 or 4 or 5 questions, is that, as you can see, it's one topic. This is a spousal sponsorship. Now, yes, it's obviously linked to an exclusion order in that second one, but all in all, I mean, it's all focused on a spousal sponsorship. So again, this saves you a ton of time, a ton of concentration, and you can really, really, really zone in and focus on one area in order to really make sure that, of course, you're getting all these answers correct. Now, let's talk about timing. So I know everybody says it's 140 questions, I'm never going to have time to finish it, and that's okay. It's okay to be a little bit worried about this, but keep up with the work. Keep working through the lessons, through our simulations, of course, and you'll be fine. Now here is the math. So we have those 3 questions from Amir, and if those 3 questions took you 2 minutes to answer, now we have 70 questions of this nature. And remember, in this case, 70 questions does not mean 70 stories that we have to read. 70 questions means 16 or 17 or maybe even 15 stories that we have to read. So when you have this, of course, are you going to have to work on your speed? Well, in some ways, yes. In some ways, no. One of those big advantages of this is that it's going to help you actually with your speed. So if you took 2 minutes to answer these 3 questions, and that's 120 seconds, so we divide that by 3 questions, that winds up being 40 seconds per question. Why did we do this so quickly? Well, you're not reading the story. Or you're not reading the story again, or even if you're going through it again, you've already seen it, so you're working through it really, really quickly. Now that is, I think this is the biggest advantage of this change from the ICCRC, is that for all of you, you're going to be able to work through the exam hopefully quicker than you would have otherwise, because you're going to use one story to answer 3 or 4 or 5 questions for about half of the exam. So it's going to be really, I think, such a great exam for you, and I think it's going to be actually beneficial for you. So if you're worried about the exam, don't worry. I mean, that's a big advantage for you. So in total, with those 70 questions, what we're hoping is that you'll be able to finish those in 47 minutes. And that's going to leave you, of course, a lot of time to verify your answers, to work on the other ones. So I hope, especially with this slide, I really hope you can see that this new format, we're excited about it. I hope you're excited about it, and I think it certainly has a lot of advantages for you. I can see it on the other side as an examiner, that they want you to spend more time answering questions rather than reading scenarios. And I think that makes perfect sense in assessing your immigration knowledge and your ability to function as an RCIC. So I really think it's a win-win for the ICCRC in assessing people who want to become RCICs. I think it's a win-win for you, of course, because I think that the exam, well, just in terms of speed, and if you're strategizing, if you're working, and if you're going through the lessons and really studying, I think it won't be as difficult of an exam as you think it is. All right, so let's conclude here. And like I said, I think that these exam changes are neutral, or I would say even positive, really. Let's talk about the positives and the negatives here, just to conclude. So on the positive side, as we saw, you will spend less time reading the stories in the exam and more time answering questions. The content is the same, so that's going to be great. So you don't have really new little elements to work through. You don't have to jump from topic to topic, and I completely agree with Barbara when she talks about that, where you're not going to go from refugees to PNP to federal skilled worker, etc. Instead, you're going to have 3 or 4 or 5 questions dealing with one theme, and then you will work through that theme and then move on to maybe a couple questions that jump around, but then another question that has another story that has maybe 3 questions tied to it that will be with the same topic. So again, big advantage in there. For us, of course, all of our material is perfect for this still, so we're really happy with this as well. All the free lessons are perfect for this. The Test Day Data Booklet is still perfect for your exam. Simulations are still perfect, and we're making a ton of free material to make sure that you are ready. So there's going to be the free material available for everybody. There's going to be the material available for people who purchased the simulations, so you'll be able to access more questions for yourselves, of course, when we send you an email next week. And again, I mean, you have a month to prepare. So it's a new format. You'll have to get used to the new format. There are tons and tons and tons of advantages in this. There's a couple disadvantages, though. This was a last-minute change. That's never fun. So that could be a little bit stressful. But it's okay. I mean, it's something that you'll have to get used to for your life as an immigration consultant. And you're going to have to answer 140 questions. So 2 little disadvantages, and I think there's a lot of advantages in this. So again, it's something that changed on your exam just not even 24 hours ago. We're on it. We're here to help you. And of course, for yourselves, don't worry about it. I know it sounds pretty stressful, and I know if I were in your shoes, I would be a little bit stressed out about it. But we're here to help you. And as you can see, as we've seen in this video as well, the changes, I think they're mostly positive, and they will certainly have an effect on your exam, but it will be a mostly positive effect. All right, so be sure to visit our website and our partners as well. So when changes like this happen, I know it can be stressful for you, and that's okay. We're here to support you. Keep up the good work. Don't reschedule your exam. Really make sure that you're going to take those next steps, and you'll be fine. I mean, if you've been working through the free lessons, if you've been working through the simulations, you'll be fine. We just have to add on a little tiny extra little step. But don't worry, I mean, you're halfway there already, or maybe even more than halfway. And we will, of course, work together to make sure that you can go all the way and become an RCIC.